This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello and welcome. It's Friday, October 15th, and this is Orlando Sentinel Now. Today, we're talking about threats being made to school board members in Central Florida in and out of meetings. Plus, we give you an inside look at revamps to Brightline trains. I'm your host, Joe Mario Pedersen, and joining me today, I have education reporter Leslie Postal and transportation reporter Kevin Spear. Thank you both so much for being here today. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Leslie, I'm coming to you first for a story that you're working on that is quite distressing about hostile intentions or tensions rather in school board meetings across Central Florida. And getting into this story, I first really just want to ask you because I think this captures the overall flavor here of what is it like these days to be a school board member?
Well, I think it's a lot more nerve-wracking than it has been before. I mean, people have always come to school board meetings on certain hot button issues, school attendance zones or debates over sometimes textbooks or what books are being used in a class. That's really been ratcheted up recently. And some board members feel like, most people coming are just coming to share their views, but there's a segment that's really angry and it seems very personal, and they are shouting things at board members, making threats, heckling other people in the crowds. It's just taken kind of a turn, an ugly turn, many people say.
That is pretty awful to hear. And from what it sounded like, these heckles or this unpleasantness has followed school board members outside of meetings as well, right?
Right, and most notably in Brevard County, where the school board member who said she's been harassed for months spoke about it at a board meeting Tuesday and has been on national news speaking about it.
I don't reject people coming here and speaking their voice. They do it all the time. We don't stop them from doing that. I don't reject them standing outside my home. I reject them following me around in a car, following my car around. I reject them saying that they're coming for me, that I need to beg for mercy.
Pretty scary stuff from what she described.
As you pointed out, there's certainly a history of differing opinions at school board meetings, and certainly there can be passion behind that. But this is anger, and this is or not almost. This is irrational anger in a lot of cases. And I'm wondering, what have school board members thought that is igniting these tensions so much?
Well, I mean, the big flashpoint seems to be face masks and the debate over whether they should be mandated or not. There's also, still kind of ongoing debate about critical race theory, which is not taught in Florida's public schools, and the governor has made it clear it can't be, but people continue to come to meetings, sometimes riled up about that. But the big issue is face masks. But that continues to be an issue even in places that don't have mandates, like Seminole County. I mean, there's a lot of people who still come to talk about face masks at Seminole school board meetings, even though the majority of the board did not want a mandate and has not put a mandate in place.
Leslie, I'm wondering these tensions and these threats that are being made has this been a detriment to the school board's ability to meet different items on their agenda?
Probably most of them would say no, they're getting the work done. But I did speak with a board member in Osceola who said she felt like it was hurting that, that some of this was taking up a lot of time, even though some, like I said, decisions about face masks have largely been made already. And, that there's a lot of other issues, budget issues and teacher salaries and bus driver shortages that boards need to deal with. And they, are spending a lot of time on this. But I'd say for the most part, the boards are doing what they need to do. But this is certainly taking up a good chunk of their time as well.
So, Leslie, with school board members saying that this really hasn't affected their job too much, or at least their ability to do their job, there still has to be a level of comfort here in order to do that job. So, I'm wondering, what have school boards done to increase security to ensure that level of comfort?
Right. I mean, they certainly have made changes. They're pretty noticeable at the Orange County School Board. You can't enter the building now until I think like half an hour before the meeting is to start. You go through metal detectors, your bag is searched, and you can't hang out in the lobby like you used to. You have to go right, sign up to be a speaker, or and then go right in the room and sit down, or just go right in the board chambers and sit down. And there are a lot more police officers visible than there were before. And I'm sure there are other security protocols that are not as obvious that are also in place. But really just the whole atmosphere in the room has changed. I mean, and when you leave, they funnel you right outside. You can't go back into the lobby. So yeah, there's pretty visible changes to how meetings are being run at this point.
Certainly a distressing story here, and one that we're going to continue to keep our eye on. If you're all interested in finding out more details about this, you can find Leslie's work at orlandosentinel.com coming out soon. Leslie, thank you so much. All right, Kevin, I want to come over to you now for a story that we are actually taking a look over in California to see how it affects things here in Florida. We're talking about Brightline. And before we get into how this might affect Florida residents, I want to ask you about some revamps to Brightline trains. What kind of revamps are coming to those trains?
There's a lot of backstory here, but yeah, revamp. So I wouldn't say revamp so much as just the overall approach to style that Brightline has taken to its trains. We're all familiar, or many of us are familiar with the enormous amount of work that they've done here in Florida, building rail between Orlando and Miami for passenger service. But there's a counterpart to that, and that is building trains out in California at a factory owned by Siemens. They're a worldwide corporation that happens to specialize in trains. And about 10 years ago, Brightline went to Siemens and said, we need to build a train for our passenger service between Miami and Orlando, or in Florida. So from that, discussions evolved that created a train that looks like it is very, very speedy, faster than it actually is. And that all plays into the presentation and the experience that Brightline is trying to arrive at for its passenger service.
So, getting into some of these aesthetic decisions, then, your story tells us about the nose of the train, the skirt of the train, and how these decisions in the aesthetic of the train actually reveals the business strategy of Brightline quite a bit.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when Brightline went out there, they worked with Siemens. Siemens had a platform for a locomotive. They had a platform for the coach cars, and Brightline said, we got to make these look really, really good. And they worked at it for a couple of years and did that. The interiors are, we should talk about that, are pretty amazing. But the exterior, it's meant to look like a high-speed train, like a train you might find in Europe. It's meant to appeal visually from the time you see it. So there are other, Amtrak and its state partners are now starting to use the same locomotives and coach cars. They don't look like a Brightline train. And one of the things is that the Amtrak in the states that have similar cars, they use the coupler sticking out of the nose of the locomotive. And that's the thing that grabs onto another locomotive or another coach car, right? It's the thing that looks like a big metal fist sticking right out of the nose of those other locomotives. Brightline said, no, we don't want that. So they build a nose cone that covers it. And the result is it actually looks like a high-speed train that you might find in a train station in France or Spain. And so they've worked really hard on the image of Brightline trains.
Hmm. So, with that image, though, I am curious because you put a lot of emphasis on Brightline is putting on an image of a fast train. But what does that mean for the train's actual speed? I mean, is this a
Yeah.
fast train, or what kind of speeds
Yeah,
could people expect
yeah.
from it?
It'll be one of the fastest in the country. And admittedly, US trains aren't that fast relative to the rest of the world, but it will go around 80 miles an hour along much of the East Coast coming up from Miami. But once it turns west and comes across Orange County aiming at Orlando International Airport, it will go 125 miles an hour, which will be the second fastest train behind an Amtrak train called a Acela. That's pretty fast.
Absolutely.
They don't need that fast train look. They could, even if they had that coupler sticking out of the nose, they could still go 125 miles an hour. So they are going pretty darn fast, but they're going to look like they're really going fast. And I think Brightline wants that experience. They want you to look at the train and go, wow, that's cool. And then about the inside of it, they have seats, leather seats that are really spread out. It's really spacious inside, and there's huge windows, and it feels like a great big luxury living room that's going pretty fast. The seats are made by a company that also makes seats for Ferrari and Lamborghini. They're pretty cool. So it's not going to be like mass transit at all. It's not going to be like Sunrail, even remotely. It's going to be something that people will say, and I imagine you will, all of us in the room will at some point go, hey, I want to check that out. That looks pretty cool. That's what they're betting on.
So that being said, then with this luxury experience that it's giving to its trains, as your story has mentioned, there is no coach on these trains. So what kind of price tag could Florida residents expect from this? Is there an estimate on that?
Yeah, there's no economy class to speak of. It's more like business and first class. Brightline hasn't set a price, and they haven't arrived and said, here's what it's going to cost. But a lot of their executives suggested around $100 one way between Miami and Orlando, and that's going to fluctuate north and south of that number, as they're going to use variable pricing according to the time of day, I'm sorry, and also whether you're in the business or the first class, around $100. And they mean to price that to be competitive, generally speaking, with how much it would cost you to drive, gas and tolls and all of that. We'll see how that goes. That's yet to be seen.
Absolutely. If you're all interested in that story, there's a lot more to it, including the behind the scenes on the creation of these trains themselves. So I highly encourage everyone to go take a look at that story at orlandosentinel.com. It's a great read.
It's a good
Kevin,
read, right?
yeah, it's a great read. And at orlandosentinel.com, of course, you can get caught up on all different kinds of news and events that are happening in and around Central Florida. So be sure to get caught up with those as well. For those of you who subscribe to the Orlando Sentinel, thank you so much for continuing to support this kind of work and supporting local journalism. For those of you who want to become supporters, it's easy to do so. All you need to do is visit orlandosentinel.com/subscribe. Well, thank you for it. As for OSN, that's our show here for today, but we'll be back again next week. A big thank you to Kevin and Leslie for keeping us filled in and what's going on in our community. We'll see you again soon. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on orlandosentinel.com.